So, is it actually possible to raise highly disciplined children without ever raising your voice? Well, welcome to today's Explainer. We are looking at a truly fascinating approach to achieving absolute peace at home without all the yelling through the traditional methodology of health and child educator Barbara O'Neill. Whether you're in the thick of actively raising kids right now, or you're just genuinely fascinated by human behavior and family dynamics, you are going to find her deeply structured approach incredibly thought-provoking.
Okay, let's dive right into this. The core framework of O'Neill's approach really rests on three big pillars: routine, respect, and responsibility. Basically, this is a comprehensive, biblically based parenting methodology that prioritizes extreme consistency and crystal clear boundaries. We're going to break down exactly how she argues these principles can completely transform an unruly, chaotic household into a peaceful, highly functional team.
Here's our visual roadmap for this explainer. We'll be covering family unity, daily routine, discipline and brain development, practical infant training, servanthood and life skills, and lastly, managing homeschooling chaos. All right, starting things off with Section 1, the foundation of family unity. According to this approach, all successful child rearing fundamentally starts before the child even enters the picture. It begins entirely with the dynamic between the parents. O'Neill grounds her advice in traditional biblical roles, specifically drawing from the book of Ephesians. She outlines a very specific dynamic where husbands are tasked to love their wives as themselves and lead as the, quote, captain of the ship. On the flip side, wives are explicitly tasked to reverence their husbands. O'Neill interprets this as showing deep, public respect and absolutely not challenging his leadership in front of others. She notes this dynamic creates an environment of total, unshakable security for the kids. So the absolutely crucial point here is that O'Neill is adamant the parents must present a completely unified front. In fact, she argues it's actually far better for a child to be wrongly punished than for one parent to step in and contradict the other right in front of the kids. She points out that witnessing parental division completely shatters a child's sense of security, whereas seeing their parents perfectly aligned, well, that creates a deeply safe foundation for the entire home. Moving right along to Section 2, order and daily routine. Once that parental foundation is set, the very next step is structuring the child's environment. Why? Because children fundamentally crave the safety of a predictable daily rhythm. Let's look at how this builds in practice. O'Neill shares a pretty striking anecdote about a couple with a 5-year-old who was so unruly and obnoxious that, honestly, his own parents admitted they didn't even like him anymore. So they decided to implement a strict 7 p.m. bedtime just to reclaim their evenings. Look at this timeline. On day 1, they faced a solid 30 minutes of resistance. Day 2, it dropped to 15 minutes. Day 3, just 5 minutes. And by day 4, the child simply went to bed without a single fuss. By standing together and enforcing this incredibly simple routine, the parents were completely stunned to find they had an entirely different, much happier child in just a matter of days. But why exactly did this work so well? O'Neill explains that the biological and emotional reasons are deeply intertwined here. You see, strict routines align directly with natural body rhythms. Going to sleep early maximizes those vital pre-midnight hours when serotonin release is actually at its highest. And beyond just the biology, knowing exactly what's going to happen and when makes a child feel incredibly safe. It literally removes their anxiety and replaces it with comfort. Which brings us to Section 3, discipline and brain development. Delving into the actual mechanics of discipline, this isn't just about getting kids to behave. It's about how clearer boundaries actually shape a child's physical brain structure. This cause and effect loop is fascinating. O'Neill emphasizes that the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that governs reason, intellect, judgment, and self-control, is actively strengthened through natural consequences. Here's how it works. You establish a clear boundary. The child, inevitably, tests it. You enforce an immediate, truthful consequence. Through this exact repetition, the child learns self-control, and their prefrontal cortex physically gets stronger. Without those consequences, she argues, this part of the brain simply doesn't fully develop. And this brilliantly illustrates O'Neill's heavy reliance on natural consequences, even using some rather unorthodox examples. She actually recounts letting her own crawling infant safely experience the natural discomforts of the world to learn boundaries organically. In one instance, she and her husband positioned themselves on either side of an open grate, literally allowing their baby to crawl close enough to feel the intense heat on his face, without getting burned, of course, so he'd naturally learn to avoid the fire. In another example, she let her baby crawl right into crashing ocean waves until the sheer discomfort taught him to stop. Basically, she let nature do the teaching.
Okay, Section 4, Practical Infant Training.
So how early can you actually start applying these concepts? According to O'Neill, you begin with highly practical infant training long before they can even utter a single word. Take her exact protocol for a biting 9-month-old. When the baby bites, the parent immediately puts the child down and literally leaves the room until the physical pain stops, usually just a couple of minutes. This is an immediate natural consequence. You bite, you lose the comfort of being held. But notice this last step. When the mother returns, she asks to try again and gives a warm smile. In O'Neill's methodology, that smile is a crucial recurring motif. It immediately follows the firm correction to communicate total, unconditional love. We see the exact same principle apply to a poking 7-month-old. If the baby pokes or scratches for attention, O'Neill advises turning your head completely away for 10 seconds, then 20 seconds for the next offense, and 30 seconds for the third. This escalating physical withdrawal teaches the baby that aggressive behavior instantly results in a loss of attention. But again, you always return with that warm smile. The boundary is absolute, but so is the affection.
Next up, Section 5, Servanthood and Life Skills.
As we explore how O'Neill transitions children from this early stage of basic obedience into becoming active, contributing, and highly appreciated members of the household, she really emphasizes teaching kids the joy of servanthood from a very young age. Her own young grandchildren would literally massage the feet of visiting guests, learning to serve and just glowing from the guests' genuine appreciation. Young kids also assembled their own first aid kits to help the family out. As they grew into teenagers, the task scaled up to digging compost holes and growing their own crops like pumpkins and cucumbers to sell.
Which leads to this absolutely fantastic visual. O'Neill tells the story of her 14-year-old son using the money he earned entirely from selling his garden cucumbers to buy his very first mountain bike. He walked straight into the shop and placed a $50 deposit on the counter, made entirely of $2 coins. The shop owner actually remarked that this boy would truly value that bike. And he did. It beautifully illustrates the profound sense of self-worth and responsibility learned through genuine hard work. Finally, Section 6, Managing Homeschooling Chaos. Of course, it isn't always smooth sailing, right? Drawing directly from O'Neill's intense experiences as a homeschooling mother of 6, living in a rainforest, imagine this scenario. Your oldest is suddenly struggling with long division. The next one is frustrated with their handwriting. The 4-year-old is screaming because a doll's dress just won't fit. The 2-year-old just kicked his toe and is bleeding. And the baby is suddenly hungry and wailing at the top of their lungs. It all happens at the exact same time. This is the peak chaos moment where the limbic system, your emotional brain, just wants to scream right alongside them. But screaming doesn't work. So here is O'Neill's 3-step protocol for instantly diffusing that household chaos. First, take a deep breath and center yourself. She suggests a quick prayer for patience. Second, call an absolute and immediate break to the schoolwork. Stop the momentum of the stress right in its tracks. And third, assign simple, immediate diversion tasks. Have one child help with the doll's dress. Have another go fetch a Band-Aid for the bleeding toe while you sit down and feed the baby. Within 5 minutes, she notes, the tension completely dissipates and you regain a peaceful tone in the home. Which brings us to the end of today's explainer and leaves us with this final thought. We've looked at strict, unified parenting, the incredible power of daily rhythms, and using natural cause and effect to literally build a child's brain. So could implementing these predictable routines and enforcing natural consequences be the exact blueprint needed to reshape the environment of your own home? It's certainly a methodology that demands high effort, but according to Barbara O'Neill, it yields the absolute highest possible rewards. Thanks so much for joining us, and keep learning.